actually always wanted to be a teacher. I never remember wanting to be anything else. I always loved to help people. I liked to watch people understand something for the first time, that joy and that excitement.
Meet Laura Gurek. She's a first-year chemistry teacher at Herrick's High School on Long Island in New York.
My typical day as a teacher at Herrick's starts very early. I try to get here about 6:40. Then what I usually do is go right to the copy room, make sure that I have everything that I need for that day, and then I start teaching at 7:30, and then the rest of the day is a whirlwind.
Herrick's High School is very high performing, but pretty typical of Long Island. About 96, 97% of students leave here and go on to higher education. We have 69 different languages spoken in the homes of the 1,400 kids in the high school. So it's an incredibly diverse population.
The diversity extends to the academic readiness of the students in Laura's classroom. Like many new teachers, Laura struggles to keep her lessons engaging to students with a wide range of interests, learning styles, and curriculum knowledge.
I might have students that are struggling very much with the material, and then in the same class I have students that are hoping to go on to take AP Biology and AP Chemistry next year. It's hard to do in one class. How do you challenge your top students while not leaving anybody behind?
Teachers must be able to adapt their lessons so they can be understood by students with different aptitudes and abilities. A teacher who differentiates responds to the diverse learning needs of her students. This increases the likelihood that all students will learn key concepts.
So today we're continuing our gas laws discussion. Can you pass one back to
Laura has begun to differentiate, designing lessons that address the multiple intelligences in her classroom.
Okay, pressure is constant. Your volume went down. What had to have happened to your temperature? It went down. Some students are really strong math students, so they're going to really latch on to those equations and the math behind it. And other students, they need to be able to see things, and they need to be able to see examples in order for them to really learn and understand the concept. Those are all different ways that hopefully we will help all different types of learners, whether they be auditory, sensory, or they like to write things down and just do the math behind it.
Go, people!
Still, Laura struggles to keep all her students engaged and working to their maximum potential.
It's easier for me to hit on a different type of learner in my lesson, but it's harder for me to work with students at very different ability levels in one particular class.
I can count on one hand the number of times I give an exact same homework assignment to everybody in the room in a whole school year.
Rick Wormley is a science teacher from Virginia and an expert on differentiating instruction.
Some kids need batting, some catching, some need to lift some weights, some running, whatever it is, but not everybody's doing batting practice. You change the practice according to what children need at the time.
Differentiated instruction is kind of the pragmatist credo, whatever works. You've got this one lesson you're going to do. You're sensitive to, is it working or not? And if the kids aren't learning to the level they do, what do I need to do to adjust it? It's having such a diverse repertoire of responses that I can respond to the needs of my students. So a lot of people call differentiated instruction responsive teaching.
Laura consults with Rick via Skype to get some practical tips on differentiating instruction.
Hey Laura, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, ready to talk some differentiated instruction. What do you have for me today?
So I have a very diverse group of students, some at the very, very high end of the class who are really accelerated and like to self-learn the material before it even is introduced in class. So I'm having a little trouble with really hitting everybody and making sure that everybody has that appropriate challenge.
How do you know these students are accelerated?
They're preparing for the SAT 2 already.
Yeah.
So they're taking a review class. So they've already been taught in a review way what the topic is. So they've gone through the book, they've gone through practice questions, they've had homeworks on it, and I haven't taught a thing yet.
Before a teacher can differentiate successfully, she must accurately assess the level of her students' competence.
Assessment has to be accurate in a differentiated class. if I make a decision based on false assessment data, the whole enterprise of teaching and learning very successfully, let alone grading, and whatever happens with the child's future will also be based on this faulty premise.
Assessment should be continuous to track student progress. Teachers can pass out an informal questionnaire before teaching a new concept to gauge student knowledge. Use ongoing assessments like exit slips or classroom discussion to see who is struggling. Make sure the assessment accurately tests the concept being taught.
Every problem I write in my tests and my quizzes, I'm going to say, and which standard or benchmark or learning target is that? And in learning targets, where's the evidence of that? And is that ample evidence? We have taught all the time that a grade is far more accurate when it's clear and consistent over time, not one snapshot moment in time.
So how do you deal with a variety of readiness levels in the same 43 minutes or 86 minutes?
Correct.
All right. Well, how familiar are you with tiering and scaffolding? Have you studied any of that in your undergraduate or in-service training?
Not formally yet, no.
A teacher who tiers a lesson teaches the same concept to everyone, but varies the level of complexity to engage all students.
Let's choose one right now that you have to teach. And let's figure out, okay, what's for the basic class and what could we do for the more advanced students?
So we just finished up gas laws.
Okay, so name one that you would want to get across.
The ideal gas law.
And explain that for all those listening, myself included.
So it is the equation that's used for ideal gases that allows us to figure out the pressure, temperature, volume relationships while also changing the number of moles of a gas.
So what's the basic thing you'd want students to be able to do at the end of that lesson?
Really just be able to look at and read a word problem and be able to extract the information from the word problem to put it into the formula and solve for an unknown.
Can you have word problems where there's lots of extraneous information that might confuse the students?
They love that.
Right. So I could have, for those advanced kids, some complex word problems where it's not so obvious how you manipulate everything, and some where it's very direct and very forward, and then slowly segue from one to the other for that earlier introductory group.
Tiering a lesson allows all students to experience success.
Students of all ages crave competence. And if they don't get it, they feel humiliated, they feel hurt, they feel angry. So if I do something developmentally appropriate and they shine, they understand that element of it, they're very motivated.
So now, next steps, right away. What's going to happen for you in your lesson design in the next 2 or 3 days? What are some things you actually will change or try?
I think I definitely want to try diverging or splitting up the class in a sense in an organized way.
You could do a global lesson for 10 to 15 minutes and then really let people expand their own ways. These advanced students really go off on another level that you've prepared for them, much more challenging, and these other kids are much more rudimentary. Then the two groups come together, or 3 groups, whatever it might be. They come back together and summarize what they're able to pull out as salient from that.
I need to mix and match. I will put higher performing with lower performing sometimes. I'll put all higher performing, sometimes all lower performing. It's going to be very, very dynamic, and you won't always be with the same group.
Readiness level isn't the only way to group students in a differentiated classroom. Students can also be grouped based on interests or learning styles.
We talk about groups, small groups in the class, flexible groups in the class, as having these semi-permeable membranes. They're very dynamic. They're not static in their membership. And students can change that as long as you present evidence you're ready to move on to this other station. Anything else?
I really definitely want to go more into the research as well and try to get my hands on some differentiated instruction books and to see what's out there.
There are books out there on differentiated instruction, but you want to find the ones with chapters on scaffolding and tiering.
You can't just read one book and suddenly you know how to differentiate instruction. So I recommend usually 3 or 4 books in the very first year, and you pull out the stuff that works.
To your volume.
This is amazing.
Back at Herrick's, Laura has added tiering to her teaching toolkit.
Using a different difficulty level word problem has been helpful because the students then are able to work at their own level and be challenged at a level that's suitable for themselves.
No pressure.
That's your homework, so start it now. Okay, so you're going to give me a written description of what happened. why you think it happened, and which Gauss law is this?
She is using exit slips to assess student mastery of new concepts.
Oh, no, whatever.
Bye, have a good day, guys. See you tomorrow.
But working with groups remains a challenge.
It takes time. People don't realize that even grouping students takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation time. It's a challenge to try to incorporate everything into every lesson.
It just seems overwhelming. It seems like sometimes, okay, I'm just going to do individualized plans for everybody. And nobody's asking anybody to do that. You don't have to differentiate 24/7. It's often just fine for everybody to do the exact same thing. Whole class instruction is a part of a differentiated class, but you're going to have to realize there'll be some flexible grouping, some independent stuff from time to time, and you wax and you wane and kind of go through all that. That's all right. I mean, seriously, one differentiated idea per month for 3 years. That's a teacher on pace for learning this.
I know that one day I will be an expert in differentiated instruction, and it will not be today, it will not be tomorrow. It just takes a lot of time.